All of a sudden, our user growth right after that big announcement, you could just see the trajectory change.
That's Stella Garber. After shutting down her first startup to help grow Trello from 15 employees to a $425 million exit as VP of marketing,
I had to make the choice of here's this product that I love, that I'm super passionate about, and what a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
she's now raised $5 million to build an AI tool called Hoop that keeps you from ever having to write a to-do list again.
We knew what it felt like to have a product that was growing like crazy organically.
She told me her most practical frameworks for product-led growth, why AI won't be building our products for us anytime soon, and why high-performing teams work in bursts. This is Stella Garber's founding journey. Stella, welcome to the podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to this. For anyone who doesn't know, Hoop aggregates and centralizes tasks across everything from Zoom to Slack to email, and you've been building this for a while after spending 7+ years at Trello, I believe, as one of the first employees. Show me the taco dog here.
This was what you got for every employee for every year of service on their taco-versary. So Taco is the mascot of Trello. I don't know if they still do this at Atlassian. I don't think so, but this is a really special little thing.
Yeah, so you've probably got a lot of taco dogs back there.
I do. I have like a little pyramid of tacos.
Cool. So I guess let's go back to that. Like before you had your first taco dog, you were one of the first 10 employees at Trello. And I think you actually started out as a user even before that. Can you tell me how that jump kind of happened?
Yeah, it was super cool. I was one of the first handful when Trello launched in 2011. I was definitely on the early wave of users because I love productivity and organization. And so I was actually running a startup at the time, and the CEO of Trello, one of the co-founders, Michael Pryor, had been a customer of actually a previous startup. His name was on our homepage. So he had reached out to me, and we were catching up, and he asked me if I wanted to come join Trello because they were about to spin it out as its own company. It had come out of this dev shop called Fog Creek Software, and he wanted me to come on sort of run marketing, be the first marketing person. And it was a really interesting opportunity because I was working on this startup and it was like going well, but it wasn't like going super, super well. And I had to make the choice of here's this product that I love, that I'm, super passionate about, and what a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so I basically found a soft landing for the startup and joined Trello right at Series A, and was part of the big sort of hockey stick growth and that was the experience that I was really looking forward to at that point in my career, was being part of a company that was on this amazing growth trajectory.
Having joined so early and then gone through that whole process, what were the biggest changes between how you first got in there and were doing marketing as a small team, just at the Series A, to then going through this crazy hypergrowth period?
Yeah, it was incredible. I think when I first came on, I think it was employee number 15 or something, but the first sort of non-technical, the first marketing hour, we had a couple other non-technical folks in support and people. Anyways, and so everyone thought marketing was stupid, which is a very normal thing that I had run into previously working with a lot of engineers. I shouldn't say stupid, but they thought, marketing was buying billboards or Google ads. And, I think that you had to really prove yourself and prove that marketing and specific strategies would work before anybody really would give you the resources to do it. And so one of the first things that I wanted to do was to have this newsletter and have a press moment for us. This was back in 2014 when I just started. We had just reached this major milestone of 5 million users. And I was like, great, we can use this as an opportunity to, have this press moment, be in TechCrunch, accelerate growth. And people were like, oh, that's stupid. That's not going to work. And I'm like, great. I love that. I love coming in and having to prove yourself with data. And so I just put together this announcement, and we had this this was again 2014. So we put together this fun infographic of what does it mean to have 5 million users and how quickly we got there. We got some reporters into our New York office people, one of the beautiful things about Trello was that so many people loved it. It was such a product that people had a lot of emotions and still do. And so we were able to translate that. And all of a sudden, our user growth right after that big announcement, you could just see the trajectory change. So all of a sudden, the engineers and everybody didn't think marketing was so stupid. And so I was able to get more resources. And I think that's the big difference is when you come in as the first marketer, you just have to make things up and you have to prove yourself. And there's a lot of scrappiness involved. And obviously, as we grew and we had more resources and we formalized certain programs like a content program. We invested in our brand. We invested in a sales team. So marketing had to support the sales team. So all of these things became much more formalized, and we had teams around it. We had people who were dedicated to certain things. And even though I do think there's a good amount of making things up, which is how it should be, I'm a huge believer in first principles thinking. And with Trello specifically, product-led growth as a discipline or as a strategy didn't really exist. It was like Slack was happening around the same time and Trello was happening. And so as a marketer, my first principles thinking is all right, clearly this product has amazing organic growth. So which strategies are off the table? Well, paid acquisition doesn't make any sense. It's not, economically feasible. But, product marketing, basically telling stories about the product, helping people understand how they can use Trello in different facets of their life. These are things, getting product marketing managers in, which we didn't even really know. We were just embed marketing people with the product team, and then they would share here's what customers are saying and, what assets can we make out of it? So it was a lot of first principles thinking that would help, support the organic growth that we were seeing.
Yeah. And I think that you guys were one of the companies that really charted that course and built out that playbook for what a good PLG motion is, right? And a lot of companies now today in the last few years have taken that and run with it. If you are doing this now with Hoop, you're sort of back in the early stages of something. What are the things that you maybe took from that experience where you're still able to take what you learned about PLG, but also about the first principles perspective that got you to that strategy that you're applying to Hoop?
Well, there's so much has changed now. I think when we were launching Hoop, you didn't have the magnitude and volume of different SaaS options as you have today, where people are just, there's so much that there's decision fatigue about what tools to use. So I think that's a really big difference. Hoop is an AI first product. And so we have costs associated with running, with using LLMs on our back end. And so we don't have a free product. And that's a big difference also in terms of business model. At Trello, we had the free product, and we sort of thought of that free product as the customer acquisition engine. And with Hoop, we have a 7-day free trial, and then you can choose to subscribe or not. So I think that there's differences, and actually a lot of the learning came from that. Where at Trello we had to support this millions and millions of free user base, and then convert some small percentage of it, and that obviously there's pros and cons to that as well. So I feel like we came into this experience, and the real thing that, going back to the first principles thinking, is build something super valuable that people love and come back to every day, something that really solves a problem for them in a way that is remarkable, in a way that is maybe unexpected, where there's a bit of an aha moment. At Trello, we knew that the aha moment was when somebody would, in their onboarding, when they would take a card and move it to another list. If you didn't get that action, people thought it was a Pinterest board. And so one of our sort of product insights was in the first few minutes after somebody onboarded, you needed to get them to move a card from one list to another. And so at Hoop, we have, our aha moment. And again, coming back to this idea of like wowing people in their first, showing value in their first, in an unexpected way in their first, minute or two, we have this thing where Hoop is capturing tasks across email, Slack, and meetings. And so in our onboarding, after people connect tools, we do like a look back, and as they come in, we populate tasks that are existing for them, like their tasks from Slack. And people are like, oh my gosh, this is what? Like that was in Slack, now it's here. Or, we have like this demo video that we show where my co-founder Justin explains that if you say something in a meeting, it's going to show up in Hoop, and he sort of points up, and then in the background you see Hoop, and you can just see people have this moment of like, whoa, I didn't realize you could do that. And so I think that's the moment that you want to capture, the delight. Also, not just delight the utility, but also that it applies to them, and that it's going to make their life more useful, and it has to happen very quickly. So that's something that we definitely took away from Trello as well.
One thing I'm picking up super clearly from this conversation already is that you are a marketer by training, but you approach it from a very product-centric lens, user-centric lens, right? I'm sure there's tons of ways to market a product, but the first and foremost way that it sounds like we're talking about is just make the product really great and surprising and deliver value quickly to users. Is that a conscious thing that you do from first principles, or is it just sort of your natural state?
I think maybe somewhat natural, just because I think great products that are remarkable, people want to talk about them. People want to look cool and tell their friends about them. People want to, feel a certain way when they're using a product. And I feel like that emotion and that's the thing that really great products will take away. I'm not saying that they market themselves, not at all. You definitely need to have a lot of like education and product marketing in there, but the core, it's a lot easier when the core product is something that's really useful and really great. So I think my co-founder Justin, who led product at Trello and was really sort of the visionary behind a lot of the great early product. He led design and engineering as well in the early days. We have a really great partnership where we just are both really aligned on the fact that ultimately the product has to deliver on some experience, that's some problem that the customer is looking to solve. And that just makes it much easier to come up with ways to get the word out about it. So it's less about tactics, less about strategies, and more about like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then the tactics and strategies come in later when you think about what are the best ways to accomplish that goal.
I love that. That's said so well. I think that when people see a product that seems to be growing very organically, it can be easy to hear that or see that and then say, oh, marketing this product must be easy. But I think that it actually creates some pretty unique challenges. So curious your POV on that.
Well, it's certainly easier. There's always challenges and there's always pros and cons. I think that really great products that grow organically are picking up on some sort of insight that solves a problem, but then also they're approaching it in a way that feels novel and interesting. For Trello, that was, oh my gosh, I have all these Post-it notes lying around, and being able to take a tactile experience that was really familiar and have it be digitized, approachable in a way that hadn't been necessarily experienced before. I think that was the real wow factor of Trello back, in the early days. I think today there's this really interesting opportunity with AI where there are so many new experiences that you could manufacture to solve problems. And that's what makes me so excited about what we're doing at Hoop. And even just as a user of products, I love trying out new products and seeing, what is the AI native approach? What can I do differently with AI at the core of a product or a problem that I couldn't do previously?
Yeah. Do you think that AI is making it easier to sort of have products grow this way? Or do you think that because more people are able to create products more quickly with AI, it's actually going to make it harder in the long run to stand out?
I think it's probably a little of both. I've seen so many, hot takes on, oh, I built this DocuSign clone in 2 days. And it really, we are just talking about this today internally about how, back in the day, you would have these Hacker News posts that would be like, oh, Trello, I could build this in a weekend, and really maybe you could build like 70% of it or 75% of it, but it's that last 25% that's really a lot of polish and insight and, hundreds of customer conversations. Like that's the thing that really makes the product remarkable and useful. And so that I don't think that doesn't happen by building something over the weekend. For the most part, I'm sure there are outliers. And, the ability to build products more quickly with the AI tools will certainly accelerate getting like proof of concepts out so that people who, want to build an MVP or just try to understand if they can build some sort of a niche workflow product, that will certainly get faster. But, I definitely think there's so much craft in building products that it sort of it's a bit of a disservice to think that AI is just gonna, build products itself or whatever.
Yeah, I think that, and we're seeing movement towards those crafted products being the ones that stand out. Like
Exactly.
quintessential example from the last few years would be Linear, right? Linear
Mm-hmm.
is a tool where they put a lot into the design and they've made a big brand about it on X and online. People even copy their landing page templates. And so I think building products that way can be a way to stand out because you have beyond what someone could get to in even a reasonable amount of time spinning up a clone.
Totally. And I think the co-founder of Linear talks a lot about taste and how having like a design opinion and just really having your own sort of relying on your intuition and being an experienced either designer or PM, how that really plays into their design philosophy. And I found that was very similar to what we had at Trello and sort of what we're carrying over into Hoop, where it really comes down and taste comes down to, every understanding that every piece of the customer experience needs to feel connected, needs to feel purposeful, that you're building, if a customer is asking you to build a certain feature, you don't just build it, you take a step back and ask them like, well, what problem are you trying to solve, and sort of taking a more systematic approach. And that goes back to the earlier sort of point about how there's so much craft involved in building, outstanding products that, we just need to make sure that we don't get ahead of ourselves with the AI stuff.
Yeah, it's funny because you can see that in Hoop, even though it's early days for you guys, and I think raised $5 million from Index and a few other folks, but you can already see that sort of ethos come through. So yeah, would recommend that people check it out. I guess I want to hit on the AI stuff a little bit more because people are interested in it. What does the future of productivity look like, and how does Hoop kind of play into that?
I think the future of productivity is really about solving this work about work problem. It's about taking the finite amount of time that people have, time is the ultimate scarce resource, and having humans use their time in the ways that are the most meaningful. So doing creative pursuits, doing collaborative, with other people, and sort of AI can do a lot of the rote, repetitive, automated things that maybe we're bad at doing ourselves. Like in the case of Hoop, is writing things down or remembering things, or, relying on mark unread in Slack to, there's all these sort of hacks that we have for ourselves. I think, the most prominent example of that in the last couple of years has been the meeting note taker, where before you might have had the executive assistant sitting in a meeting, or it was someone's job to take notes in the meeting. And so, AI is really good at that because you just, it's a transcript, and then it generates the transcript by being there at the meeting, and there are any number of, meeting note takers out there that you can use. And that's like it seems like a very obvious thing that's being automated away. And so I think it's really interesting to think about, like, what are these other places in your life where you're doing sort of work that can be automated, work that's repetitive. And I think a lot of that is going to be replaced by AI or AI workflows or products that are thinking in sort of an AI native framework.
That makes a ton of sense, and I have that problem to the 100th degree with my daily Slack reminders that I keep updating. So I need to get on to Hoop ASAP.
Well, I would say like our main insight when we actually raised the $5 million, we were fundraising on a different idea. This was right before ChatGPT came out, and as ChatGPT came out, for everyone on the team, we were like, this is a game changer. Like, we understood that we had to sort of drop everything and think about how we could build something that's incorporating this new, these new capabilities that we didn't have via an API before. And so when we were thinking about it, we're like, okay, if we have a lot of experience. I mean, 5 out of the 7 people on our team are from Trello. So we were like, we have this great depth of knowledge in the task management space. What could you do differently today with sort of AI at the core that you couldn't do 10 years ago when we were building Trello? And our insight was that, in Trello, you have to create cards, or in any system, Jira, Asana, whatever, you have to write out tickets of things that you need to do. And our insight was like, well, you shouldn't have to do that because the AI should know. The AI can be in your meeting. The AI could have access to your Slack and your email. And anytime somebody is asking you to do something, it just can create a task. And more than that, it can give you the context for the task. And more than that, it can give you, other sort of supporting information that will help you with the task. And maybe over time, it can even help you do the task itself. So that was the inspiration behind Hoop. And we're just really excited about everything that you're going to be seeing that is just so different from how people used to work and maybe how people still work today.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've heard similar things where people have, had a company that they were building, and then the drop of ChatGPT is just such a meteor strike moment, changes the whole dynamic of what they were building. I'm curious, once that happened, obviously I know what the idea you guys went to was and the insight that you landed on, but how did you get there? How did you reach conviction on that new idea?
Yeah, so the initial product idea we had was around decision making, because decision making on teams is very broken and there's a lot of decision science that hasn't been productized. And so our first MVP, the one that we raised the money on, was around productizing better decision making. And so we were onboarding customers into that product. And then ChatGPT came out and we started incorporating some of the AI features like summarizing decisions. And the product that we were building, we were very excited about, but we weren't getting a ton of market validation from it. And so we were like, okay, we need to take a step back and rethink what we're doing here. So we went through a very, very systematized process. I actually wrote about this and I'm happy to share more, but where everybody on the team came up with ideas. We followed as a framework of like, what have we learned so far? What have we heard from the market? How much conviction do we have about these different ideas? And we came together at an offsite and we sort of like talked through each idea. We rated things and we came out with a lot of excitement about this, AI first, AI's native task management idea. And we built an MVP over about 6 weeks or so. And then we started, and so this is only like last February that we started onboarding customers into it. And the MVP just had Zoom meetings, and I believe we had Slack at that time too, where it was like creating tasks for you out of your meetings and your out of Slack. And it was like night and day difference. It felt, when you talk about the early indications of product market fit at the earliest stages, and they talk a lot about like push and pull, we were pulling really hard, or we were trying to make this decision thing work. And we were like, having these phone calls with these customers. We're like, yeah, this is great. But then they wouldn't use the product. They wouldn't share it with their team. It was also a product that required everyone on the team to be on board before you sort of saw that. That's just the nature of like making decisions. And so that was one learning coming into this pivot was like, all right, we definitely know that we have to focus on individuals and individual value before we expand to teams. And then, because we're not doing that again. And so, but anyways, it was a bit of a night and day difference where all of a sudden people were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I need this. I need this. I need you to add email to this. I need this, so it just became a very different sort of a feeling. And we just knew that we were onto something.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's one of those things where if it's not a hell yes, it's probably a no, right? And it's like,
Right.
As a founder, you can tell if the market's going to grab that out of you or not.
But you can't, and sort of you can't. There's so much conflicting advice because there's this other advice that's like, oh, keep building, especially because there's the idea of the MVP, and then there's the conflicting idea that, there's so much competition that the MVP is now the minimum lovable product, or you have to put a lot more. Even I think the Linear co-founder has talked about how it's like an outdated idea. And so I think that's what makes it really hard when you're pivoting, because you're like, well, did I give this idea enough resources? And in hindsight bias, right? Like you're like, oh, obviously I should have known earlier. But when you're in that moment, it's so hard to know. And especially when you've put so much of your energy and effort and conviction into it, it's really hard to pivot. But having the before and after and understanding how different it can feel. And I think this is where, being a founder or having like experience at different startups helps, because we knew what it felt like to have a product that was growing like crazy organically, and like that just wasn't happening with the product that we were building.
Yeah, I think that's definitely helpful experience for sort of knowing when to pull that trigger. What would be your best piece of advice to a founder who has a product that they love and they see it solving a problem, but it's just not hitting, and they've put resources into it? How should they know when to pull that trigger?
I think that it's less about how you feel. You sort of have to abstract yourself away and look at the data, and even a little bit of data around how much, if at all, customers are using the product. Are they willing to pay for it? That's obviously a really big thing. And those indications, you can't really listen to what people say. We were big fans of the Mom Test, which is this great book that every early stage founder should read, about how like basically people lie to you because they just want to avoid feeling bad. And we certainly experienced that when people are like, yeah, we love this product. We're like, awesome. And we're like so stoked. And then they like never actually used it. So I think you have to focus on what people do versus what people say. And, and then I think the second big thing is just that the people are right, that you have the right audience, that you're talking to the audience the right way. While we were building our MVP for the Hoop product today, we actually did a bunch of landing page testing by buying ads on Meta. And we would test, how many people are clicking on this message versus this message. And so we were able to like get a little bit of signal as in terms of demand before we were even putting a bunch of resources into a new product.
The old forgotten landing page test. I feel like every founder should be doing that with 5 to 10 ideas before they start building something new.
Yeah, and even if you have conviction about an idea, even the messaging and how you're going to go to market is really key, because we had this idea of like, we love this idea of the to-do list that writes itself. And you can even see that in some of our early stuff, but that kind of doesn't resonate with a lot of people because it doesn't get to the benefit of what Hoop is doing or the problem that Hoop is solving. And so the messaging that we've sort of landed on that seems to resonate with people and solves a big problem is that it's all your tasks in one spot automatically. So same product, but different way of talking about it.
That's so interesting because the first one, it sounds just as good on a billboard or on a banner, but it doesn't hit the same way for the actual users who are going to become users. Okay, so I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is that, you were a founder and then you joined Trello, went on this amazing journey to the $400+ million acquisition, but you obviously needed to sort of prove out business cases to get resources within another company. And you sort of went from this mindset of being a founder, basically being accountable to no one, right? Except maybe your co-founder, and then going into a company. How did you make that decision? Because I think that's like interesting for other founders to hear about.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer that there's different seasons of your life. And I think this is the really hard part when you're a founder because, and things maybe aren't going as well as you'd like them to, is you feel like you're a failure or you feel like, the world is ending. And the reality is, number one, nobody cares. There's this whole thing about the spotlight effect where you feel like, the spotlight's on you. But again, in reality, everybody thinks the spotlight is on them. And so there's that. And so I think it can be really hard when you're a founder to take a step back and say, well, this is my identity. Well, it's just part of it's not really your identity. It's what you're doing. And you can go back to being a founder in a different season of your life. So I think that really helps me when I think about just different things that I do and what's best for me at any moment in my life. I've worked in startups my whole career. My first job right out of college was to be basically on the founding team of a fintech company that was, after 3 years, acquired by Groupon. And it was an incredible experience because I was right next to the founders, the first employee, like just doing everything, learning. My degree was in psychology, so I didn't even know what marketing was or that I was okay at marketing or whatever. It was just like the two co-founders are both super technical. They're building the product. So what am I doing? I'm going to go out and find customers. I'm going to go out and do customer support. I'm going to do marketing. I'm going to do PR. I'm going to wash the floors, like whatever it is, right? And so that was a really cool experience. And then, so I think that there's, you just get these different experiences. When at the Atlassian acquisition, it was super weird for me because I'm not like a big company person in the beginning. I had a lot of like, what am I doing here? But took a step back and was like, what an incredible opportunity for me to learn. What an incredible opportunity for me to grow Trello within this, bigger Atlassian bucket that has all of these resources and these amazing people that I can learn from. Like, I'm so grateful for that, even though I'm not like, let's say, a big company person. So anyways, my biggest advice for founders, and this is coming from, doing the startup thing multiple times, is just that it's when things are going well, great. When things aren't going well, that's it. That's the job. It's just always, you got to keep on going. And if it's not this startup, it'll be the next one.
Yeah. I mean, you guys have obviously, you've been able to translate that kind of mindset into some great success early on with Hoop. I think you guys were number 2 product of the day on Product Hunt for the launch.
Yeah. It really killed us. We were like a few votes away from being number 1.
Sorry to bring up that
trauma. Yeah. Startup trauma right there.
But what is the recipe to do well in Product Hunt? Like number 2 is nothing to sneeze at,
Yeah, well, the number 1 product had a bit of a head start because they were in Europe, so they got a head start. But whatever. First of all, I don't know, but I'll tell you what we've done and is really tell a great story. This is the same advice that the Product Hunt people will tell you, is to really focus on the story and the tagline. Don't focus a ton on the video. For the most part, nobody watches the video. And, we did it in-house for like, my co-founder Brian just did it in CapCut in like a few hours, and I think that was great because we were making changes up until the deadline. So if we had invested in some fancy video, like it would have been outdated. So, and I think the hugest thing is you have to have a community of people that's going to come out and support you. So we had so many early customers who came in and wrote reviews and upvoted, and we were doing outreach to like basically everybody that we knew, every community that we were part of, our customers, anybody we'd interacted with in the last few years. We were like, hey, can you support us? And because we had built up this goodwill of great experiences, whether someone had converted to paying for the product, whether or not, we still had like good relationships with them. And so we were able to translate that into a lot of support for the product, also the team, because, we are a team of humans that are building a product. It's not just about the product. So those are the big things were around getting the story right, or getting the story to be compelling. The second thing was having the community come out and ask them. Like, I was DMing people on LinkedIn that whole day, starting really early. So Product Hunt at midnight, they open at midnight Pacific time is when you get listed. So I was up, I'm in Central Time. I was up at 2 a.m. and I was up for the full, basically 24-hour, 22 hours, trying to get people to be involved in the launch and responding to messages and, sending a newsletter as soon as people were awake on the West Coast and then on the East Coast. And I think, and even maybe the biggest thing is to just understand what you want to get out of the Product Hunt launch. Because we actually didn't get like a ton of customers, but what we did get was a lot of great data about when we launched on Product Hunt, it was the first time we were doing a self-serve onboarding experience versus a white glove, like founder-led onboarding experience. So we were able to generate, hundreds of trials in our self-serve funnel and learn a lot. And that was the goal. The goal wasn't to I think that those days are kind of behind in terms of Product Hunt driving some sort of a crazy, I don't even know.
Yeah, definitely harder to use it as a major acquisition challenge. It is good for SEO backlinks early on for a lot of founders too. But yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, it was kind of weird. Like, as soon as you launch on Product Hunt, I feel like there's this whole ecosystem of spammers that start reaching out to you. And we even saw during the day, there were some weird things going on with like vote counts, and then a product would disappear. And I would imagine that they were doing something shady and the Product Hunt team caught them and just pulled it out. And so maybe another big piece of advice is don't be shady.
Good general life advice right there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they've gotten more aggressive with that in the hopes of sort of driving more actual signups through the launches in the future. So they're doing what they can for sure.
Yeah. And there are things you can do. Like, I definitely read all these posts about how you should start messaging people weeks in advance and, supporting people. And I've actually been a pretty active Product Hunt user over the last few years because I just love new products and the community on there. And so I feel like it's a little bit, you can definitely manufacture some part of winning, but a lot of it is just, is this product interesting? Are you presenting it in an interesting way? Is your community behind you?
Another thing I wanted to spend some time on chatting with you about is remote work, because you're building a tool that can really help people who are working remotely or have their team remote. Also, I think you guys are fully remote yourselves too. Yes. So I know you've talked about remote work before. You've also talked about the four-day work week before. I'd be curious to to dig into that and sort of get what's the thinking behind 4-day work week? It's not common to hear that from a founder, right?
I think this is one of these things that's very hot topic, hot take. If you actually look at data on productivity, there is nothing that supports, I shouldn't say nothing, but there's very little data that supports what people think is what makes a company successful, which is working 100 hours a week and sleeping under the desk and, never seeing your family. That's if you look at the data around what makes people productive, it's control over their time, being able to optimize for when they do their best work, having clear goals around what they're trying to accomplish and what success means for them in their role. And so a lot of we at Hoop, we do practice a reduced work week. 4-day work week is a little, I don't love that. It's kind of a fun marketing phrase, but the reality is that what people really want is flexibility. So I have 2 kids. I don't want to cram 5 days of work into 4, or even try to do, a crazy 4 days of working 12 hours. What I like to do is think about how to spend my time in the best way over the week. And so sometimes that'll be working on, on a Sunday night, because I'm actually I'm a powerhouse on Sunday night, but Friday afternoon, I just don't think anybody gets any work done on a Friday afternoon. So where are we going to pretend that we do? So I feel like at Hoop, our culture is very high autonomy, high expectations, high trust. And we're hiring very senior people who thrive in that kind of environment. And so I think that maybe the trade-off for a founder is that we're hiring people that we may not have hired because we have this really different culture that really prizes autonomy and high performance and trust. And then the flip side of it, though, is that you have to live up to those. You have to live up to that culture. We work 80% asynchronously, and then we strive to be about 20% synchronous. So Monday through Thursday, we have a 2-hour chunk of time in the middle of the day that everybody's online and available for meetings, and we're usually very, talkative with each other. But at the same time, the rest of the time, people go and they crank and they do focus work, and they don't need to do there's just so much like work about work. And so we try to really eliminate as much of that as we can.
That makes a lot of sense given the product that you're building.
Right. Yeah. And then going back to I really do think it's more what people really want is flexibility and autonomy. And I think that gets a little bit lost in the 4-day work week conversation because we're so fixated on the 4 days. So we have folks at Hoop who work, I think most people end up working 5 days, sometimes more. We have folks who maybe on certain weeks are doing 4 like pretty intense days. And it just comes down to getting your work done.
Yeah, I think as long as you're not blocking someone else on the team and you're delivering what you're responsible for, flexibility is great. And I think especially when you're targeting hiring these senior folks who kind of know what to do, they don't need the coaching, they just need time to get their work done. I think that strategy lets you attract those types of more senior folks, which can free up your management time to also be more productive yourself.
Definitely. And I think, at Trello, we were, for the most part, distributed. We had an office in New York that was sort of a place where if you had offsites, you could come to New York and have an offsite. But the team was, for the most part, remote. We had a really strong culture. And when Atlassian acquired Trello, one of the things that they wanted to learn from was our really strong remote culture. Because really, at most, especially bigger companies that are working across offices, they're pretty much, they're working across departments that are in different cities. Like if you're working in tech and you're in front of a computer, I strongly believe that there's no real need to be in an office 5 days a week. Like, I think that's really silly and backwards thinking. And in fact, I think it's a huge hit on productivity, as a lot of the data shows. Anyways, so Atlassian adopted so many of Trello's remote work practices. And then famously, right at the start of the pandemic, Atlassian went completely distributed, and they've been very strong about being thought leaders in distributed work ever since.
So you mentioned async time versus like dedicated time where synchronicity is possible and planned. How did you land on that 80-20 split? And I guess like what are the learnings from that?
How did we land on it? I think that when we were just getting started with Hoop and we're thinking about the type of company that we wanted to build, we were thinking a lot about creativity and what makes for the conditions for creativity. I think a lot of that is the freedom to think and the freedom to, own your time and be able to have long stretches of time when you're doing deep focused work, writing, coding, writing strategy stuff, working on marketing campaigns, whatever it is. So we wanted it to be very a focus on deep work, because that's what, so much of the research shows that's like what drives productivity. And I think there's this Pareto's principle, or I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Pareto's principle, about how you get, 80% of the benefit from 20% of the thing, whatever the thing is. So it's like, it seems like we could get 80% of the benefit of synchronicity with 20% of the time. And so that's what we sort of, we don't stick to it, but it's sort of a general principle. So we do have those core hours, and then we do offsites regularly where we're in person, where we're building relationships with people and the psychological safety, and that's what helps us work. I think one big thing that people get wrong about remote work, or when they think about remote work, they think that it's completely remote. And that is not how I've experienced. I've worked remotely for the vast majority of my career. There's a lot of coming together, being very thoughtful about how you're using collaboration time, and then going and cranking and executing.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think I saw somewhere that you're basically a remote work OG. You've been doing this for
Yes.
way longer than just the pandemic.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. In fact, when the pandemic started that year in January, I was starting to write I was like, this year I'm going to write a book about managing remote teams, because I had been traveling around different conferences and talking about how remote work was the future. And the first thing that people always asked is, well, how do I know people are working when they're remote? And I'm like, how do you know that they're working when they're in an office? And it's crazy to me that we've gone through this. It's 5 years now since the pandemic started, basically. I think this week is going to be the 5-year anniversary. And it's crazy to me that we're like somehow still having this conversation.
Yeah, I think that the concept I've seen you talk about and how you framed this before has been like burstiness. Is that am I
Yeah, the
saying that right?
burstiness. Yeah.
Yeah. What is burstiness?
So burstiness is this, I certainly didn't make it up. It's this researched, I'm like a big research nerd. So
We'll give you credit for it. It's fine.
I think it came out of Google, actually. Google did a big study maybe 10 years ago about like what makes for remarkable teams. And one of the things was this idea that people build on each other's ideas very rapidly. And that's called burstiness. So that's like, you're in a meeting and someone says something, you're like, oh yeah, and this, oh yeah, whoa, what if we did it this way? So you have to have an environment for that kind of burstiness to happen, where people feel safe, where people feel supported, and also, people are together for that kind of burstiness to happen. You see this in Slack. When I say together, I don't necessarily mean physically together, but like, working on something at the same time. And I think that that's when people talk about like water cooler talk, or like the value of meetings. So much of it is this back and forth. But I think that the dark side of it is that it can be very distracting. I know I'm a huge extrovert. So anytime I'm in an office, I'm just like chatting all day, and I get nothing done. And so, I really appreciate the ability that there are moments when you can have the burstiness and talk about something, and then there's time that's set aside for the deep work that like is creative and really matters.
Yeah. Also, I think there's probably two different types of burstiness, right? There's burstiness, which is just like you're just having sort of spontaneous conversations and it's just going in any direction. And then there's burstiness, which is what you were talking about at the beginning, which is like you're in a meeting and you're just kind of riffing off each other, and you actually coming to very interesting conclusions as a result.
Yeah, but there are ways. And so I think there's two quick points. I think that a lot of the remote work conversation is very one size fits all. And, with the Amazon return to office policy and some of these bigger companies, and it's not one size fits all. I think depending on the industry, what you're trying to accomplish, like hardware businesses, they can't be remote for the most part. So trying to put like a one size fits all thing really does a disservice to everybody. And then secondly, in terms of the sort of like the water cooler conversation thing, that's also been disproven in research, because what ends up happening is people will talk to and congregate with the like 5 people within their 10-foot radius for the most part. And especially if you're in a company on like multiple floors, in fact, there's more spontaneous conversations by having like a random channel in Slack, or a, pet photos channel in Slack, or whatever it is, where you can do something that's meant to build relationships, but in like a remote first way.
I guess for somebody who is, 5 years on from the pandemic now, who's still sort of struggling with setting up the right processes for their remote team, or they see decreased efficiency, and how do we get them on the right track? What's the 80-20 of that?
Well, I think the biggest thing that people sort of miss, especially the companies that don't start out remote, that's the real challenge, is if you're trying to switch from being in person to remote, you can't just be like, oh, that's it, we're a remote company now. Like, that's not how it works. You wouldn't show up to an office that didn't have chairs or Wi-Fi, so it all comes down to starting with a very strong structure and a lot of that comes from leadership and management, understanding that remote work just happens differently than when people are in an office and you can like tap someone on the shoulder and ask them a question. So there's got to be way more documentation. People have to explicitly know like in the next 2 days, what do they need to do to be successful? So there's got to be a lot more like documentation, a lot more things that are said explicitly in lots of different ways so that people understand what it means to be successful. And I think that there's a mix of this kind of meeting interaction and then also like depending on the role, if you're in sales, what's the quota? What are you trying to accomplish? What is the objective measure of your success? I think that's the real big, what it boils down to is being really objective about success and for people to understand what their job is to contribute to that success.
I think one tension that I see in remote teams that aren't doing it, quote unquote, the right way, or at least successfully, is that, they feel that documentation tends to matter a lot more or starts to matter a lot more in a remote setting. And there's this tension between that idea and then needing to move faster at a startup and too much documentation being outdated by the time it's done and it ends up slowing you down. How do you rectify that?
I don't think that you don't need to be writing a novel. I think it's more if you set up like a daily stand-up channel in Slack and people are writing like, this is what I shipped today, or this is what I'm planning on doing today, or, I think at a startup, I've been at startups where it's, there's not a lot of strategy. You're just shipping. And I've been at startups that are much more thoughtful and strategic and where you don't necessarily move slower, but you move with much more intention. And I've seen that approach work much better than the just sort of, I don't want to say sloppy, but like moving fast, like moving fast at all costs. I just think that has, in my experience, not been something that works well long term.
We can call it sloppy. It's okay.
It's not sloppy. It's just a different approach. And again, it comes down to, I don't think that there is any one right way, but I do think that understanding that people need structure and that if something's not working, it's not because remote work is bad. It's because there are probably things that you can do that will improve communication, that will improve, people's workflows or whatever the expectations are. A lot of that comes again from leadership and management training about how to manage remote teams.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think I now feel like more people who are watching this or listening to this will be able to go out and improve their remote team productivity. So I think that's great. And they should be using Hoop to improve it even further.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm glad you said that. But also there's so much great documentation about how companies that run remotely or that, give flexibility how they run. Dropbox, Atlassian, NVIDIA, Airbnb, all these companies, Zapier, there's a lot of them and a lot of them produce great content that you can adopt in your own startup. Obviously, it's easy to just have everyone. My first startup, actually, there was a moment where we would all sit around a table in a co-working space with a pizza. So I've had that experience before. and I just, it's not a sustainable practice. I can see why people like it because you can see everybody and you can tap someone on the shoulder. But here's the thing, when you're tapping someone on the shoulder, especially if they're an engineer or a designer or a writer, that's 20 minutes of time that they have to now. And this is like the scientific proven number of every distraction takes 20 minutes to get back to the thing that you were working on before. So there's a huge opportunity cost to sitting around the table with the pizza in terms of productivity.
Yeah, you need like a little like shoulder swatter to block people from. Stella, this has been great. I have a couple of rapid fire outro questions I want to get through. We ask everyone. Are you up for that?
Of course.
Okay, let's do it. So rapid fire outro questions. So name an investor who other founders should take capital from and why.
Name an investor. Okay. We have so many amazing investors on our cap table. Would highlight Samara Hernandez from Chingona Ventures. She's based here in Chicago. Why is she an amazing partner to a pre-seed startup. She understands what it means to have conviction at a time when maybe you just have a prototype or you don't have a ton of customers. So she's not afraid to take risks. And I think that she's just a lovely human as well.
No better reason than that. What's one thing that you would change about the startup world?
I think there are a lot of really harmful sort of truths that people accept. So one of them is, and I think particularly a lot of these truths hurt women and stop women from going into the startup world. So the idea that a founder is a 20-something guy, in a hoodie sleeping under his desk, like that's really harmful. And if you look at the actual data of who starts the most, or which type of founder is going to be the most successful long term, it's actually like founders 40 plus in terms of age who, this isn't their first rodeo. So I think that harmful truth is really not great. I think the other one around remote work, that I was hopeful that during the pandemic, when productivity actually went up, it didn't go down, and people were like at home with their kids and they still managed to get their work done. And then now there's still this question of productivity and at home. And so that makes me sort of scratch my head. So I feel like there are still these sort of things that are accepted that aren't necessarily true. And that drives me crazy. I'll give one other example we were just talking about today, is the idea that AI is going to just, that you can build a clone of a product over a weekend using AI tools, and now that company's dead. It's just silly. And I feel like it's not even AI. It's like every few years there's some hype cycle of technology, and then it's like, oh, everything is dead. Everything is dead. And like, that's just not how things work, I feel.
Yeah, I think I've been writing my founder newsletter now for almost 3 years. And I think during that time, email has died twice.
There you go. Email has died. Outbound has died. Content has died. SEO is dead. Like everything is dead until it's not. And you hear a successful, case study out of something.
Yeah, until people realize what the new playbook is, basically. Okay, what's your number one piece of advice for a first-time founder?
I think for a first-time founder, my number one piece of advice would be to have great co-founders who share your vision and who have complementary skill sets, and most importantly, have the same values and goals as you. I think that's really underrated, is just how important the co-founder relationship is and how amazing it is when you have co-founders that really, are complementary in so many different ways.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that one. Founders should spend more time up front on that, even if it delays things slightly. To find the right person, it's important.
Definitely.
Okay, and last one. What is something you believe that most people disagree with you on?
Probably the remote work stuff. Somehow, building a distributed team is still spicy, and I don't understand why. I do think that in the last few years, there are so many startups that have started remotely, and so you're going to see more and more of those success stories. I didn't even mention Linear. We talked about Linear earlier, also a distributed team. And so I think those companies that sort of start remote and then grow and scale remotely and figure it out, we're going to start seeing more of those companies, because also the top talent want to be in places that respect their skills and autonomy. And so anytime there's some sort of a return to office, you get the top people who leave and go to the competitor. And there's just going to be over time, like that's how this game plays out.
Yeah, I could see that happening for sure. The top people will opt into building the things that let them build the way they want to build at the end of the day.
Yeah, and working with other smart people and working in cultures that encourage, encourage them to stretch and don't care about, how late they're sitting in an office, as if that means anything.
Well, Stella, hey, thanks for grabbing some time and chatting with me today. I think a ton of great stuff in here for founders. Everyone should go check out Hoop. It's hoop.app. Where else can they find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Startup Stella, and also on LinkedIn, just Stella Garber.
Sweet. Well, thanks so much. And I'm looking forward to seeing Hoop's growth from here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
Thanks for listening. I write up my main takeaways from every conversation and make them available to all of our members at foundingjourney.com. along with a bunch of other perks and more content. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to Founding Journey on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. I post a new episode every Thursday. Also, consider leaving us a rating or a review. As a brand new podcast, this is the best way for us to get out there and founders to find us. See you next time.